Welcome back to another episode of the Scaling Creative Podcast. Today we're going to talk about conflict, something that a lot of people don't like, but here's what we know to be true about conflict. It's inevitable, and it can be and should be valuable when looked at correctly.
It's my favorite thing in the world.
That's good.
First off, happy Thursday. Today we're recording this on a Thursday. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
So great.
Everybody's good?
Well, sunshine's blaring through the windows here. I love sunshine. Sunshine just puts me in such a better mood.
Arizona, man. Got to get you there.
That's what they call it, that sunshine.
Diego.
I used to live there.
Or San Diego.
San Diego.
That too. And then that's why people say like it has San Diego and then have like a sunshine tax.
Yeah.
Basically the idea of why it's so expensive because it's just, how can you be in a bad mood when it's sunny all the time?
That's right.
You pay for that weather and that sun.
And in and out.
Ah,
That's another conversation, though.
everyone's like, what is this podcast about? We're talking about conflict. Why are there no In-N-Out burgers on the East Coast?
Right. Huge conflict.
Anyway, so we're going to dive into the topic of conflict, but first just wanted to go around a little bit and talk about why do we feel like, or let's give first takes how you feel about conflict in general. Honest takes. Michaela, how do you feel about it?
So I'm going to start with Enneagram talk.
Yeah.
So sevens are actually known for not liking conflict.
Okay.
And which
Sevens represent.
yeah. But you're a 7-8
I
and
know.
8s actually, not that they thrive in conflict, but they're the challengers.
Yep.
So they're not as much afraid
They
of
like
it.
a good debate.
Yeah. So I in the past have avoided it like the plague or like the coronavirus. But
Good current example. Very good.
but I'm much better at it now because I've learned how to do it.
Right.
And I've been forced to do it, even as of late. But I don't like it.
Pablo?
Fair enough. I love conflict.
All right.
Yeah. So
Love is a strong word. Do you really love
I
it?
really do. I guess I love it for what it brings you.
I was going to say, do you love what
Okay.
comes out of it?
Yeah, I love what comes out of it, and I know what's going to
You
come
can't
out of
actually
it. Yeah.
like it.
No, it's like it's
My
uncomfortable.
ex-husband likes it. Likes conflict.
Likes conflict. Yeah.
But
and
it's different.
right,
What
and
are
I
you
think
talking
I love sorry, yes. Okay, I don't love it like I want to get out I'm out to get conflict with people. Like in fact I love people and I love relationships, all that. But I love what you get out of it because I feel like I get to know people better and I get to arrive at a different place with people once I've gone through something hard with them. You know what I mean? So like for I think a great example is me and Scott. Like we have had plenty of we've had, generally speaking, we get along really, really well, but we've had a couple really hard conversations or times or whatever throughout the career that we've had together. But I think at least the way I feel is like every single time we've ever had a conflict, we come out the other side literally better than where we were before the conflict. You know what I mean? And so, and the same thing goes for even my wife, because my wife, we don't have many conflicts per se, but when we do, we come out the other side better than we were before. And so I think for me, I just love conflict because it's something that I've learned that like I almost embrace the awkwardness. I like that because a lot of people are very scared of that. And they're like, I'd rather not even deal with the conversation because it's a little scary and it's a little uncomfortable. I prefer like, you know what? Okay, forget it. I'm going to embrace the uncomfortable and like face to face figure this thing out. And then we're going to come out the other side better. I promise. Like that's something that I love to do with people. And so it's not comfortable, not always fun, but I really enjoy what comes from it usually. So that's my kind of take on it.
Allison's like, and I'm the polar opposite.
Nah, I don't like it at all.
Sure.
I think you learn over time how to deal with conflicts.
Right.
And I've learned, even though I hate it and I don't like to confront conflicts,
Right.
you have to.
Sure.
It's worse if you don't. You'll come out
True.
worse if
Right.
you don't communicate and you don't actually take it on.
Right.
And it's something you can't avoid. Like you can't even run from a conflict.
Yeah, it's
That's how life
Yeah.
works. People are different. Everyone has their own opinion. There
Right.
always will be a conflict, and it's about how you learn how to deal with it.
Right.
So I really don't like awkward situations at all.
And
Not a fan.
And I feel
but
like you go into a conversation, I feel like the only people, and I know that I can be one of these type of people, the only person that is sometimes hard to have a conflict over is the person that you feel like ultimately is never actually listening to what you're saying. And it goes into the first thing, which I really like, so we recently were filming actually a client doing a video about conflict. And I really loved what he said, where he said, respond, don't react.
Yep.
Responding softly and just de-escalating the situation
Yeah.
before you even go into what happens next.
Right.
Like the idea of simply if Pablo comes to me with something that I really don't like him saying, there's zero value in immediately responding harshly. Like nothing good comes out of it whatsoever. So the idea of simply responding, even just the idea of like, hey, I appreciate you bringing that to me.
Yeah.
And however it goes from there, whatever, but responding softly to just de-escalate conflict is so important. And I know that I can be guilty of that. And I feel like I finally have started to get better at realizing it just does not help to just immediately respond negatively. Because I think that's the biggest problem. A lot of times you don't like going into conflict with certain people.
Yes.
Certain people you have no problem because you're like, I know they'll listen. I know that they're kind, they're caring, they're graceful, and we'll be fine. Other people you're like, anything I say, they're not going to listen to.
Yeah.
So what's the point of even having a conflict?
Right.
And that's, I feel like, really why people don't like it. It's not necessarily because certain people, it never feels like conflict.
Right.
It's just called a conversation.
No, for sure. I one of my favorite ways to approach conflict in general, like if someone has a problem with me or whatever, I always ask questions first. I have to because and sometimes I mess up or whatever, but my general goal is to always come in with questions because if you assume, the first 3 words of assume are what it's spelled for a reason. Like I think it's very, when you're like, you did this because, how do you even know that? You didn't ask them what their thought process was, because sometimes if you ask them where they're coming from, they legitimately, a lot of people do things to the best of their ability in their mind, but sometimes it doesn't come out that way. And so just asking them, like, what was your intention? Like, what were you thinking back there? Like, what was like that? And so if I come at that with that knowledge, then I'm like, okay, well then now I'm going to respond differently because now I understand where you were coming from.
Right.
At least starting there helps rather than doing what you just said, which is coming at it from a emotional, upset, like standpoint of like you're the worst or whatever. Like don't, you know what I mean? Like coming in from a question and like letting them speak first.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned in coaching school and when I was coaching women all the time was I would actually repeat back to them what I heard. And sometimes when they hear it, they're like, oh, no, that's not what I meant, you know. And so sometimes that is like one of my biggest things that I do is I just repeat back to them what I heard.
So what you're telling me is
what I heard. This is what I heard you say. I just want to make sure that I heard it correctly.
Right.
And I literally just repeat back word for word.
So interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And it shows that you're listening first, which is huge. And it also does the opposite of them being like, okay, no, let me say that again then because you didn't hear it correctly.
Right.
Where if you just respond right away, you could be responding with what you didn't hear correctly and they didn't realize you even heard it that way. And how can anything even happen from it? That's really, that's a valid point. Yeah. And I think a lot of people listen to respond and not understand.
100%.
Which is why I'm hearing you say negative things and I already check out because I'm like, well, I already know what I'm saying to this. I forget to listen to the rest.
Right.
And that's how we get ourselves in trouble.
It's so true because we're a reaction society. Like you think about Twitter or, you know, things that people say on Facebook or even everything that's going on right now in the world, politics, it's just so reactive. And we tend to regret most when we react too quickly to things. So yeah, it's always good to just take a second. I even had a conversation with a friend today and she was like, you frustrated me. And I listened to her and I actually had to say, I think I need a second to process some of this stuff. And she was like, totally respect that. When do you want to get back to me? Which that's the other thing is like, you know, if somebody needs to process it, you don't want to let it sit and like boil for too long. No. Like you have to have, I'm going to call you back in an hour or whatever it is, you know, kind of thing. So.
And it's having, and it's understanding. And that's why I do think the Enneagram thing is just such an important thing is understanding who you're talking to and understanding if they need to process that, they need to process that.
Yeah.
Right.
Tend to be more defensive.
Yes.
You know, so I'm not going to just say what I think right away when a conflict approaches. I'm just going to let it simmer because I'm going to regret it.
And
but
it's also why
Pablo's different because he would rather tackle it, you know.
In certain things though, because sometimes, and I'll let you say your thing real quick, but like sometimes it depends because like there's, you know how sometimes it says like don't go to bed angry.
Yeah,
that whole Sometimes I'm like, you know what? A good night's sleep sometimes like fixes things. Like sometimes
That's
like
literally exactly what I was
like
saying.
time.
Yep.
Sometimes like just time, you know. And don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, there's times where I'm like, I gotta fix this right now. Like I have that feeling, but I'm learning from my wife. I've also learned from you. Like some people just don't work that way, and like trying to attack a person, not attack, but like try and really get
Make
involved.
them make a decision immediately.
Yeah, it makes it worse for some people. And so sometimes I'm like, you know what? Maybe time. Like I need to fix this, but like let me just look at it from their shoes and like maybe time might actually let's sleep over this one.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, that's why I said, like, I hate the premise of, like, don't go to bed angry, because I just feel like sometimes you wake up and you're like, that was a stupid argument.
I forget sometimes.
Or you forget, and
I was like,
and if you forgot, chances are it wasn't that important.
Yeah.
Other times, yes, you're going to bring it back up and you're going to resolve it.
Yeah.
And I understand the idea is also, like, what if something happens and you
in the
die?
morning.
I get that.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Happened
but
during the
I'm not
day.
really looking at
You
that
go to
anymore.
work angry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True.
But I think that it is important, because you have to understand that if you're a person that just wants immediate response, but yeah, you come to me wanting immediate response, and I give you an immediate response, and because of that, I give you a really bad response.
Yep.
You want it immediately, where I just really should think about it, because I can come too harshly back at someone.
Right.
It doesn't value you to try to pull an opinion quickly in a conflict.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like I said, you can't let it sit and be like, let me think about this for the next 4 months and then let's talk about it.
Right.
Because conflict is conflict.
Right.
But really understanding how people like being approached and not plays a huge, huge role into that.
Right.
And that's why I really liked that, like, response softly.
Yeah.
That first.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
figure out.
Respond softly.
Yeah, I even heard actually once in my I had one marriage counseling meeting, like literally just one before he got married beforehand. Like it was funny. It was like
Enough, got it.
yeah, he was like, no, you guys are good, but like it was like literally one. And I remember from that day, because Jenny struggles with this and something that we've been working out together. He literally said, why don't you wow every idea for 2 minutes before you down it? And I was like, that's interesting. So like in this case, it's just like if you have conflict or whatever, like sometimes like almost just try your best for 2 minutes to look at it from the other person's point of view before you insert your take, because your take is going to be there no matter what. It will be there when you get back. So for 2 minutes, just put it aside and try and look at someone else's shoes and see if you see something different, and then come back. And I promise, obviously, your take on the situation will be right there when you get back from it. So, but it's just interesting to think of it that way, maybe.
The one thing too about like repeating the thing back to the person, where in the school we actually learned, we had a lot of practice with this, and the one thing I found, and it was very much so the whole room, is you interpret what they're saying. And so when I first started repeating back, I thought I was repeating back word for word, but I was repeating back my interpretation of what they said. And they were like, no, you have to listen to their words, use their words, the exact words in, because otherwise it's your interpretation back instead of what they said.
Right.
But it took some time to like learn how to do that. I was like, oh my gosh, it's a skill that you have to do. Listening is a skill.
It's true.
So which not everyone is willing to develop skills, but if you want good relationships, communication is a huge piece, and a big part of communication is listening.
True.
And so, going back on your topic too, of the idea, the importance of obviously knowing that like valuable stuff comes out of conflict.
Yeah.
Because there's so many times you have a conflict with somebody, like you said, you come out better, or in my case, I've learn certain things from people and realize, you know what, they're actually right about certain things. And it takes humility, and it takes also realizing that you're not always right to actually understand, like to really listen when you actually process what they say. Sometimes,
Which sucks in the moment.
Yeah, it sucks.
It sucks being wrong.
You'd be like, you were
Fucking
acting
hate
like
that.
a jerk or this, and you're like, no, I wasn't. So then you can think about it and be like, okay, I can see now how that might have been. But it's a skill that I think people aren't really good at. But this is I'm going to link a TED Talk in the description if you're watching this on YouTube or in the podcast. There's a TED Talk I saw from a lady named Liz Kislik. I believe that's probably how you pronounce her name. And one of the things that she said that I really liked, I'm going to pull out a couple of things from it, but the number one step she gave into resolving conflict is to rule out the possibility that a single dysfunctional person is the root of all the conflict. She said, and there's her quote, "We often have the belief that conflict would not exist if those annoying people would just get themselves together and work things out. Unfortunately, when we operate out of that belief, we tend to say and do things that cause conflict to persist and to create even more damage to both organizations and the people in them." And I definitely can see that being true in the certain things I've done in my life.
Sure.
Like certain things in people or like certain relationships people are in, that it can be very easy to side in conflict, and in turn you just basically always right away have this, what she also called evil logic, where you're kind of thinking that the person is the root of it, when the ultimate root of it is underneath everything else.
Right.
Like when two people were having a conflict, she did this really cool analogy where she named them Amy and Brian or something like that, and the conflict they thought was between the two of them, but then when she interviewed all the people that were part of the organization, they said the conflict was actually in between the other things underneath, and the other people thought that the actual conflict was between. So in other words, none of it was really an Amy and Brian thing or whatever the people's names were.
Right.
It was so much more of the root underneath the iceberg that you see from the actual piece. So her big thing in this talk was just understanding that a lot of conflict doesn't come from person A and person B.
Right.
It comes from other things,
Yeah.
which that's why the value comes out of a good conflict.
Right.
By figuring out what are we really arguing about in the first place.
Right.
'Cause it's probably not just what we're saying it is.
Yeah.
And that's what I was also when you said too, if you let things sit too long, or eventually they explode. And then, you see this in relationships all the time where they're suddenly like, yeah, but that one time you did this and you did this and you did that. And you're like, why didn't you ever bring those up then?
Yeah.
Like, why you're now going to throw all these things about you? If that was an issue, could we have talked about it in real time instead of just now trying to, like, you were just basically keeping this list and waiting for the time that you were going to throw it all back in my face rather than just talking about it in real time.
Right.
And I think that's something that I think obviously is important, because it never is a single person.
Yeah.
I think we all probably have people that we could try to argue that maybe it is always that it is a certain person a lot of times, but realistically it's probably not. And then she also said to ask the right people the right questions, like what's going right here, what drives you crazy, why do you continue to stay if this situation is so terrible? But just like getting advice from the right people about the right things can help you. Maybe also, if someone comes at you with something that you feel like is just totally wrong, seek someone that you feel like really knows you and you appreciate their input set, and bring it to them. If it's something that obviously is not a private situation, like someone mentioned to me that blah, 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 blah. Would you agree with that? Because they may be like, kind of, you're like, really?
Yeah.
That's not at all how I feel like I am.
That's good, because I'm an overthinker, and sometimes when I bounce those situations off other people that are closer to me, they're like, well, I didn't take it that way when you explained it.
Right.
So then you have to kind of restructure how you intended that conversation to be, because if someone else thinks nothing like you do, then maybe you should rethink how you took something.
Yeah.
Like a third party, someone outside, because they're not maybe looking at it as like maybe emotionally. They might not be as emotionally connected to the situation as you are.
I didn't put that together like you did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes looking at it or asking outside help is good.
Right. I just did a video about like how you handle someone who you feel like mishandled you.
Okay.
Like it's a good test.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest tests. And one of them is like, you call the right friend, because there are some people that you can go to and they're always going to fan the flame. They're always on your side. They're always like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? And they
tell her.
Yeah. yeah, like, and
How dare
those.
she say that? We all do.
We all do.
No,
we
it's
want
so
to go
true.
to those people.
And
sometimes.
you want to go to those people because you want to naturally
Feel validated.
be right and feel validated.
That feels
Yeah,
so good, but
yeah,
it's
for
wrong.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's even a parent, or, because I think one of the things is a lot of times how you handle conflict is how you saw conflict handled as a child.
True.
So how your family handled it, how your parents handled conflict within their relationship, So we carry those things with us because they're so deeply rooted in us, which is why it's like under the ice, the little tip, you see this, but a lot of it's like how you saw things as a kid.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important as a leader or a boss to understand too that like your team, your managers are going to approach conflict with their people that they're overseeing the same way that you have conflict with them in this situation.
Yep.
So it's just like a parent and a kid.
Yeah.
Like it's so important to, if you want people to, like the one guy that we work with all the time is Jimmy Costas, just incredible educator and coach. He always says like, model the behaviors that you want to see repeated because it's so important. Because people are going to do what the person in charge of them does because they're going to assume that that's obviously the way that you also see it as a value. And it's also the same that you can never take favoritisms of you have one manager that is super hard on people and rude or whatever, he gets a result done, and other managers looking like, oh, well, maybe he sees that as a value, and they don't do it under the same exact way. And you have to try as hard as you can to show people how you want them to resolve it.
Yeah.
Because they're going to treat your clients the same way. They're going to treat their other employees the same way.
Yeah.
And when we talk about culture, it's like,
oh my gosh,
they're going to follow whatever you do.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of times as a boss, it can be easy to kind of do something a certain way and then say that they did it wrong when they did the same way that you did it. And you're like, well, but I'm in charge. Like I can do it this way.
Right.
That's not how I want it. And it's like, that doesn't really work that way.
No, because that's not even like true leadership. But that's why leadership is so hard, is because a lot of it is doing things very opposite of the way that culture does things. So that's why they say leadership sometimes is lonely, because you have to do things the right way.
Right.
And it's not easy to do that.
Yeah, I think I've heard it put, there's the difference between being a leader and having a title. And like I feel like leaders are people that serve people. They follow, people follow leaders because they want to, not because they have to. You know what I mean? And then when you have a position or a title, it's like, that's like a whole nother thing. We're like, oh, you have to listen to what I'm saying because otherwise I blah, blah, whatever, fill in the blank. And so sometimes that's really hard. Yeah, it's exactly like what Jimmy Costas would come back to Jimmy, but like that's like a culture of like compliance where you have to do things because I say, rather than one of like literally where you're just like serving them and helping them and coming alongside them and leading with an example. And that really does help just in general, because then you want to follow that person rather than, it's almost like you get to follow them rather than having to. You know what I mean?
Boss has the title, leader has the people.
That's right.
A quote that I always see on LinkedIn all the time. It's just it's
good.
Really, really good. So in that TED Talk, she gave new habits. One of the 5 things she said were she said 5 ways to resolve conflict, and number 5 was teach new habits for managing differences. And I really thought these were really cool. And you brought up a good point. Clearly she likes animals because they're all like their thing. But first thing she had was called lizard listening. And it's basically the idea that our brain interprets emotional cues as if they were present physical danger, and even before we have a chance to assess what's going on or interpret them logically. So she said one of the things that you can do is reconsider what you've said or are planning to say to the person, and think about what will happen when the counterpart filters that conversation through their lizard brain. Meaning, trying to, as best we can, know that if I know that I want to say something to Pablo, but I know that internally I got to process, okay, well, if I say that, he may think that I am saying this. So trying to like put yourself in the other shoes before it even happens, and understand that they're only going to right away see it as physical danger, present physical danger, before they can assess what you like. You may have thought about this for hours and hours, and days leading up to this conversation. You're going to throw it on them. They're just going to hear it.
Yeah.
They don't have the logic behind it.
Right.
So trying to think about, there's a good chance that they will be offended, hurt, whatever.
Sure.
How can I solve if they come back with this response? And I really like that, because I think we don't really think about that very often.
That's so
understanding.
True. Yeah.
Or trying to like role play.
I was just thinking the role play thing, like where
Jimmy Costas is a role play machine. We're just going to link his YouTube channel. You just
but he'll
all about that.
He'll do that. He'll just come alongside and be like, let me ask you a question. And then he'll literally come alongside the person he's working with and role play a situation so that what he's literally doing is he's removing them out of their current situation that he's trying to teach them about and put him in an imaginary scenario. What would you do here? Because instantly their emotions taken out, and their logic is
and flipping the script.
That's it.
That's all. That's what he does a ton.
He flips
just
it
like,
to
let
them.
me get this straight. Let me ask you a question. If I were to be in this situation, do this to you, how would you feel? And like, well, blah, blah. Well, okay, but that's what you're doing. and it is so many times that you're just like, man,
so
that's
good. It's the best.
I wonder, like, when she's talking about a lizard brain, is this like how a lizard?
I don't know.
I'm still trying to figure.
Because I'm. This is what I'm thinking about right now. Like, what's wrong with a lizard brain?
I don't know.
Just
maybe
I'm gonna look that up.
No, I'm going to make an entire guess and just say that maybe that their brains are very small, so all they can do is process what's current and physical.
That's probably right.
Meaning they can't think and process anything else. It's just they see something. That's all that
they're
is taking
current
up their
processing.
brain. That's all I can think
Lizards
about.
are little.
Yeah, so they can't have very big brains.
Yeah.
That's it could be entirely wrong. It could be. Comment below if we're way off course. If you're this person, she's like, that is
not.
Once again, well, if she processed her lizard brain and realized that we may come at it from the just
yeah, I'm gonna be really upset.
But yeah, but I do think
touche.
it's important to think about like
it's
what
a good point.
misconceptions
It's a good point.
people come up with,
Yeah.
negative stuff, whatever, and try to because it's you do that in business,
Yeah.
right? If you come out with a product line of something, you naturally are kind of thinking to yourself, why wouldn't they buy this?
Yeah.
Or what problem does this solve?
Yeah.
Or, well, what about that other product that exists? What makes this different? You're kind of doing that when you are building businesses to a point.
Running
You're
it through a hypothesis almost.
Exactly, a filter.
Yeah.
And that's really what she did. The second thing she said was what she called the evil logic check, which is when people complain or do something, we tend to think that they're evil. Like we usually think that this person's out to get me.
Defensive mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus thinking this person's an intelligent person with their own thoughts, with their own processes. I don't think that they're evil, meaning there's got to be reason why they are bringing this to me.
Right, because they wouldn't bring it to them.
Don't just go at them.
They're not bringing you their worst in their head.
Yes.
Right.
As usually.
They don't, because people don't come at you, or people that at least that you trust, that you know, and usually if they're employees and stuff, you should assume that they're in it for a good cause.
Sure.
They're not usually coming at you with a conflict or negative feedback to hurt you. If they didn't care about you, they wouldn't say it at all.
Right.
Right.
So it's trying to give people the benefit of the doubt to be like, I know Pablo, that I know that nothing he would say would try to hurt anybody, nonetheless me.
Right.
So it's like it would be stupid for me to be like, he's out to get me.
Yeah.
Like if he was out to get me, he wouldn't be here. So it's like trying to just process that of if we don't believe that people are actually evil and out to get us, then there's only good that can come from what we're in.
I think benefit of the doubt is something that I love to give to people, even though I will say it's not always the case. Unfortunately. Yep.
Yeah.
And but then you get hurt and then you don't trust and then that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But I do think that like I love giving benefit of the doubt because a lot of the time their intentions weren't bad. So just starting with benefit of the doubt I think is really important, especially again, if you know the person too.
Right.
It's just inevitable, but it's tough to deal with, I think.
Yeah.
And another thing that I've always thought about too, and like, because someone said this to me, and now I feel like I use it a lot, but the like perception is reality to people, meaning I could say anything I want to you and have internally what I really mean about it, or do something because I really feel that whatever it is, and it doesn't really matter what is underneath whatsoever. All that matters is what it actually is perceived at, for the most part. So understanding that, like when I sometimes have conflict with people or I have conversations, it's trying to get them to say, I understand that's not how you meant it, but here's how you have to understand. You did this to me recently, and I think I did it to you at other points. It's like, I get that you weren't coming at it this way, but here's how it looked. And trying to understand, you know what? Even though I didn't mean it that way, if they perceived it that way, doesn't matter how I meant it. No. All that matters is what they think, like, at the end of the day, right? Like, that's...
Yeah.
And so trying to realize that even though that sucks, that it may mean explaining something over and over and over to someone to get them to eventually realize it, but it doesn't really matter if you have good intentions, if it's entirely to the person. To the person, it doesn't matter. Like, it's only what they really think of the situation.
That's why communication is so important in conflict. And as you learn through conflict, you learn how important being honest and open about your feelings are in a conflict. And that really, it helps you get through it so much better when you're able to communicate what you're feeling to someone else who doesn't take it the same way.
Right. And even when you feel like you've clearly communicated, it doesn't mean that they've clearly understood.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
So I wonder what's something that you can do about that. Like almost ask, like can you please repeat? Can you repeat back how you took? Like,
let's do a quick recap before we finish this coffee. Can we just go over what I said? Just make sure
tempers go.
I want to make sure you walk away correctly.
But no, that's a really good point though, and I think that also goes somewhat into like her third part of this, the new habit, and it goes into a lot of that honesty in the conversation. Was she said she does these things called elephant cards, where we've all heard the term the elephant in the room, whatever. Yeah. The idea is when she coaches people, or maybe even in her own organization, when they have meetings, they literally get cards in the meeting, elephant cards, and at any given point when they feel like they're at a situation that something needs to be said that's very hard, that's uncomfortable, whatever it is, they know that it's something probably no one else wants to say. They slide the card out. And it's kind of everyone's way of just being like, I'm going to say it, but I don't mean harm in it. Like, I just want to put it out there because I see this as something that no one else is seeing. Yeah. And the only other boss I had, which we've had on our podcast before, he used to say, the way he always said it was that you'd literally go into someone's office and just start with like, hey, permission to speak freely. Just the idea of, I have something to say, but by me saying that, it's acknowledging that I understand that it's probably going to sound worse than it even is, but I really think it's important that we talk about it. Yeah. And it's right away kind of just putting it out there and being like, this is not a comfortable situation. Yeah. But I can't not let it happen. Yeah. Now can we talk about it?
That's not
good
to suppress.
No.
Right.
Not at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It causes blow-ups. It causes all these things that happen.
Yeah. My pastor and his wife, they talk about this. I think they call it feeling time or something, where one of them is allowed to just express how they're feeling without the other person's reacting. It's just their free time to express their feelings. And then sometimes because fact and feeling they're two different things. Like everything that you feel is not actually a fact. Right. But the fact is you are feeling that. Like that's how you're feeling.
That's true.
So it's just like this free time for them in their marriage. Because I think that's one of the most impactful relationships of your entire life is who you're married to. And so communication with that person is the most important thing. So, but I thought that was interesting that like they're freely allowed to express their feelings without the other person reacting.
My wife and I used to do that on date nights, and we probably should do it again. I just thought about that now. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah,
but
you're welcome.
We used to, when we go on a date night, we would ask the other person, like, what is one thing that I should work on? But you couldn't respond once they said it. And you just had to leave it at what they thought. So that you couldn't justify yourself. Yeah. You couldn't make up excuses. All you could hear is, because if it's like you saying to me, you need to work on your attitude, and I say, no, I don't. If you say I need to work my attitude, clearly you feel like I need to work on my attitude, regardless whether I try to persuade you differently, right? It's like that factor feeling. Yeah. All that matters is how you actually feel about the situation, regardless of what I try to tell you differently. Right. But it's really hard.
Yeah, that is
to
hard.
Hear feedback.
Yeah.
And not come up with an excuse of why that is actually happening.
That's why they say to couple it with. Okay, so if maybe she says one thing to work on, but then one thing you're doing really well.
I think we also did that. Yeah, we used to do like good things, bad things, whatever. But the big part of the bad side was just that you couldn't respond to like justify yourself.
Isn't it interesting that it's so hard not to?
Oh yeah,
it's crazy because you want to justify
and because you listen to respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than understanding, and so you immediately come up with all the reasons rather than being like. Very interesting. I did not know that it looked that way. Okay.
Right.
And then just think about it.
Noted.
It's not easy at all.
So question then, what are some things that you feel like even in this conversation, like what's something that we each personally can apply to the next time we have conflict? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, the question for me, I think it would just be continuing to realize that when people come to me with anything, conflict or just feedback, whatever it is, to understand, to try to see that people come at it for a good reason, and not and not a bad reason.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's really the only thing I need to do to get me to actually listen versus justify things.
Right.
It's just being like, thanks for the feedback. And I feel like I feel like I'm getting, trying to get better and better at it, of really trying to apply what come at me when I let the right people speak into my life. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's also understanding
The right people.
what feedback you're getting and who's giving it plays a huge factor in that.
It's true.
Huge
Massive.
factor. Doesn't matter if someone gives me feedback that I am not trying to like that. But the people that I know have my best intentions and love me and appreciate and care for me genuinely, I should value that. Period.
Oh, yeah.
It's true.
How about you?
I don't take advice from people I wouldn't trade places
Yeah,
with.
absolutely.
So like if they're not great at relationships, I'm not taking advice from you. Like if I
Relationship advice, because you can learn something from anybody. Like maybe somebody's not good at relationships, but they can make a banging apple pie.
What?
Something. You know what I mean? Like you just
Well,
there's little
wouldn't-
things.
You wouldn't have a personal trainer that's insanely overweight.
That's what I mean. Like the person that you're talking about, that thing or
would
whatever.
make much
like,
sense.
Yeah. But like sometimes like, they may not be good at
You wouldn't
relationships.
listen to a skinny cook, It's just
Yeah, they better be 300 pounds or they have to be minimum for it to be good. No, I think no, that's a good point. I agree with that, and I think also the other thing for me, because one thing, so I like conflict and I like what comes from
the
it,
outcome. Yeah.
right? But I think the one thing that I do actually struggle with is being in the wrong. So like when someone comes to me and they like accuse me of like, you did this because of blah blah blah, that time period until it's resolved is really hard for me. Like I don't know how to be like I'm like no like genuinely like I didn't actually mean that. Like I wasn't doing it for that reason. But like it takes time to like, you have to sit with them and then talk with them, and there's like this time period of like where I'm in the wrong. That time period, I just hate it. And so I think from this conversation is like I'm taking away like, okay, well, the reason they brought it to me was because like they're hopefully they're a smart person and they're bringing it to me for a reason, because they care about me, because they see something in me, or because like maybe the way I said something came off the wrong way, whatever. So I almost have to like take a dose of my own medicine of like really give them the benefit of the doubt, and like hopefully like they understand like, okay, they're bringing it to me for a good reason. And so I think that's something I'm going to walk away with is like, something I'm constantly working on, because I hate being in the wrong, but like sometimes it's okay to be in the wrong and to not be right all the time. And for someone to like accuse you of something or like, and take that not as harshly as I have in the past maybe or whatever, but I internalize it in the moment. But I think working on that for me is something I'll probably walk away with for this. Hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
How can you love conflict more, Allison?
Give me an apple pie, chef.
Not a skinny one.
It's hard when you have conflicts with people you don't know so well, because you have no idea how they're going to react. So those are the ones I really don't like, because like I know how Michaela, like I know how all you guys are with conflict now, because we had this talk, and like the people you're very close with, you've had conflicts, you've gone through them, you've learned from them, and now you can do better next time.
Right.
But when it's just like day to day, people that you don't know, maybe little things come up, coworkers, like at my old job, it was just a huge organization, so we don't know people quite as closely.
Sure.
And even with management or anything like that, conflict will come up, and I hated going into meetings, and you'd like get the sinking feeling in your stomach, like, oh, now we gotta go talk about this, and it's the white elephant thing. But I just learned, like, especially through talking about how important those cards are, you just have to get through that. You have to communicate, and I get defensive in those situations, but you have to take some time to just sit back and listen to what they're saying. So I think it's definitely harder when you know people less and you don't know how they.
And because then you don't know their heart.
Right.
That's really, and that's why the relationships are so important.
Yeah.
When you there's no way that you can have like that evil logic check or the whole idea of like empathy or putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
If you don't even have a clue who they are.
Right.
Which is why, you're choosing the right people of who you're listening to feedback on, all that kind of stuff. But it's always going to be difficult to hear negative feedback from people that you have no clue what they're thinking. I think it's actually probably the best thing about like doing stuff on YouTube all the time now is it's actually gotten me really good of filtering out both sides of like nothing overly positive changes how I think and nothing negative, because it's kind of like I don't know anyone that is essentially just interacting. So
Yeah.
I don't take anything to
Yeah.
heart. It's like, doesn't matter if you say it's the worst video you've ever seen. It's like, I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know
a
you.
person could be miserable. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
it's, I think that's why it's probably, it's hard to have conflict with people,
Yeah.
know, because you don't
Yeah.
really know if they actually care.
Right.
Yeah.
They may be out to get your job and you don't even know. Like, and where you should be able to trust the people closest to you, which, bigger an organization gets, especially, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
only can personally know certain people,
Yeah.
which is why her big thing too was with like alignment and some of the other things she said about having alignment at the top, leadership
Yeah.
of understanding what the goals are and understanding who's in charge of what things, because a lot of conflict in organization comes from
Lack of
two
clarity.
people clarity and two people's feet in the same space, and they don't know who's actually the one that makes the ultimate decision.
Right.
Right.
Conflict comes from that alone, when it's like the conflict isn't even between the people.
Right.
They just don't know
Right.
who's supposed to be, who has ultimate call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that only can come from leadership helping that.
Yeah.
And then showing them what healthy conflict
Yeah.
looks like.
Looks like. Yeah.
Sitting
Also,
down and
I
seeing
think
it.
sometimes also just taking a breath is like important with conflict, like just realizing like it happens, things, or whatever. And like realizing like sometimes like the stuff that you're really like struggling with in the second, like 5 years from now, you won't even
No.
remember, and I've heard someone actually say we're like living in neutral sometimes is okay. Like, cause sometimes good words go to your head and sometimes bad words go to your heart. And it's like something that like, if you just live in this nice neutral, like I appreciate the praise, but I don't take other things too seriously and just like kind of do your thing and like treat people well, all that stuff. I think like a lot of it'll work itself out. It's like sometimes the stuff feels so big because it's right in front of you, but if it's not going to matter to you like 5 years from now, like the best thing you can do is just see it from someone else's shoes and try your best, at the end
That's
of the
probably
day.
what that lizard brain
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
is.
We need small
that was
brains.
what I was going to say was
Yeah.
probably my thing was the lizard brain, or just really thinking about it. Not that I don't think about it from people's point of view or their shoes,
Sure.
but just like really being a little bit more conscious of that and kind of running that through its course in your head. Now, you can't totally know, exactly how a person's going to react, but
Right.
I liked that. I liked the lizard. And now I'm also very curious, and I'm going to Google
Yeah.
All the lizards
all the lizards.
and their brains.
Their little brains.
Yeah, but no question, conflict is inevitable. It's very valuable. And understanding a lot of people don't like conflict is something that should also help you go into conflict, realizing you're both kind of maybe uncomfortable with the situation. It's like when you're not good at public speaking, they always say like, imagine everyone in the room is naked and they're awkward and uncomfortable too. Just the same premise. So next time you're in conflict, hopefully some of these things can help you. Comment below with one of your takeaways and or good resources to help us get better at conflict as well, because we all have it. You can't change it, so you may as well improve it. Thanks for watching.